And let's see, thanks, Sam. Thanks very much for that introduction as we get started. So I want to do, I want to go back. This is about funding to prevent and manage the next infectious disease pandemic, and it's about federal funding that is available for that purpose. There are some upcoming events that maybe are relevant to you that I want to make sure that we go through. Several of them are SBIR related, the SoCal SBIR STTR conference, sponsored by UC Riverside, and the SBDC there is going on right now. There are program officers from a variety of federal agencies that are available for one-on-one. Similarly, probably many of you know that in the past and this year, the SBIR agencies have put together a road tour. A couple years ago, it came to UC Irvine. This year, all of the road tours are virtual, and they made a decision, the hosts of those made a decision to open them up to anyone who wants to attend. So you also at these events have the opportunity for one-on-one and listening to program officers for federal agencies. So it's a real opportunity as well. Other things going on, they're agency specific. There's an NIH symposium at the end of October, as well as a BARDA Industry Day at the end of October. Women Talk Tech, sponsored by the SBDC at UCI. And then as well, the SoCal Investor Conference in a couple weeks. There are payments for those, there are registration fees, but it's a great opportunity to both interact with potential investors and hear startup companies pitch to those investors. All right, with that, what I would like to do is go to slides. We have a guest today, Richard Krieger. He is a co-consultant at the UCI SBDC, and he has more than 30 years experience in vitro diagnostics and medical devices. He was a longtime senior executive at Beckman Coulter, and importantly has been part of the NIH and BARDA RADx program. So he's here to talk to you about that, and I'm going to turn it over to Richard at this point. Richard?
Yep. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So I'm here to give you an update and about what's been happening around testing for SARS-CoV-2, the causative agent of COVID-19, and talk about a program, a funding program that is underway called RADx, and it stands for the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics. And I'm specifically going to talk about RADx Techs, but you'll see in my slide that there's a number of RADx programs underway. And this program, just a couple of notations at the bottom, is really sponsored by NIBIB, National Institute of Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering. That group at NIH is actually led by or directed by Bruce Tromberg, UCI alumni, former director of the Beckman Laser Institute at UCI. It's also supported by CIMMYT, which is an outside administrative agency, and also another important group, which is outside of NIH. It's called POCTERN, and I'll describe those as well. So it's a big program. It's actually a lot more people are involved, and I'll talk about that in a second. Next slide, please. So I don't have the advance, so okay. So it's probably hard to believe that you know, this pandemic feels like it's been going on for years, but it really I think, hit our consciousness probably in March, even though we now know it probably started probably back last December or November. But it really got our awareness in March. And already in April, this network, which is a point of care network, started talking about we need to get testing going in this country. So again, back in April of this year, Procter actually made a proposal to NIH to actually find and support point of care technologies that could be deployed by November of this year. Next slide. And this actually, timing was everything. It's serendipity. That announcement and that promotion came out and got the attention of two senators, Lamar Alexander and Roy Blunt. So Lamar, Republican of Tennessee, and Roy Blunt, Republican of Montana, who are part of the Senate Health Appropriations Subcommittee, actually strongly supported that and actually started the whole drive in legislation to actually increase funding to NIH to get more testing. So one of the things I do want to mention, just a small political comment, sometimes we have to, my advice is to stop watching the media circus out there, that there's a lot happening in an optimistic way behind the scenes at government and private industry level to really attack this pandemic. And sometimes I need to step away myself from just all the craziness in the media to recognize that there's thousands, if not tens of thousands, of scientists and business people working in this country to actually to get more tests out to market, and I'll show you that in a second, and also to get more treatments and ultimately vaccines. It is a very impressive exercise. And again, Lamar Alexander has been a big proponent of this effort, as has the entire committee. Next slide, please. So out of that program, the Rapid Acceleration of Diagnostics, or RADx, was actually funded by one of the CARES Acts. And out of that, $1.5 billion was awarded to NIH, and $500 million of that went to NIBIB. You can actually see the breakdown of what happened. So NIBIB actually funded RADx Tech. That's where I've been working the last 5 months, where $500 million were allocated as grant money. It's not all grants, some are contracts. I won't get into the nuance of that, where we actually set up a competition, which I will describe in a few minutes, that went actually worldwide. So companies, anybody could apply for this money from any parts of the world. 3 other RADx programs also were funded separately. RADx, which was the Advanced Technology Platforms, of $230 million. This was actually, RADx Tech was mostly focused for at-home testing or point-of-care test. RADx ATP was focused on improving the capabilities of high-throughput testing facilities. That's both sequencing and rapid molecular biology techniques. There was also RADx Up, which were $500 million, which were spent on research and grant applications to actually implement strategies for enhancing the testing of COVID-19 in vulnerable populations, such as nursing homes, elder care, socioeconomic challenged parts of the community. Then the last one was a program called RADx Rad, and actually ULP is actually part of that right now, as I am, where we're looking at non-traditional approaches or new applications of the existing approaches for testing. And these were for products that probably couldn't come out in 2020, but could come out in 2021. If anybody's interested in hearing more about RADx in detail, other than listening to me, there was an article published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It's actually shown here. It was actually, you can just check out that title. It's a free article. And again, it was written by Bruce Tromberg and others. And it really describes the RADx program quite well. At the bottom, I think it's important to see all the government agencies that we're working with. So this is a large consortium working across all these government agencies. I've had the privilege of interacting with many of them, including the CDC, FDA, BARDA, the Department of Defense as well. And now we're starting to work with CMS and OASH, but CMS to really figure out how we can get a lot of the payments for these tests covered, specifically in asymptomatic or screening circumstances. Next slide. Slide, okay. So this is a kind of a summary slide to show where we're trying to go with RADx Tech and ATP goals. This is what was set out back in April. We want to rapidly expand the amount of testing technologies, so the number of tests, the type of test, and access across the whole country. This is US based. And we also want to work on optimizing the performance. So optimizing the technology to the particular, what we call use case. So you might need a different technology to rapidly screen 200 elementary school children entering a school, or we might need a different technology for a place like on UCI's campus. And so that we're looking at trying to match that up. We're specifically focused on 3 types of test settings. Ultimately, home-based testing or over-the-counter testing is where we ultimately think the technology needs to go. Also, point-of-care testing, and that's being done in both traditional settings like doctor's offices, but non-traditional settings. So again, point-of-care is starting to work its way on the university campuses under the auspices of a clinical lab. And also the more traditional laboratories in hospitals and places like Quest and LabCorp. Back in April of this year, April 30th of this year, when RADx was launched, the annual testing that was done in the United States was at 250,000 tests per day. What you see in the lower right-hand corner is where we're projecting the amount of testing that will be available by the end of this year, and how much more testing will be added by the companies that these RADx program is supporting. One thing I didn't mention is our whole goal was to help companies get products to market as fast as possible. I've developed a lot of IVD products. Typical development times are 24 months to 36 months to get an IVD product through the FDA and to market. We're actually trying to do this all in 5 months. So it's actually a tremendous effort by all those agencies to try and expedite not only the development, but all the regulations and ultimately all the reimbursement. So with RADx companies, we're expecting by the end of December that we're going to increase the testing capacity in the United States to 6 million tests per day. Right now, if you check any of the websites, the US is testing about 1 million tests per day. It's probably a little bit higher because antigen testing right now is not being reported. And antigen tests are starting to hit the market. But the molecular tests today are about 1 million tests per day. Next slide. And this pretty much shows you all the types of innovation that's going on in the RADx program. And again, we've seen these proposals from all across the world, many of this from the United States, but new innovations in separation and concentration, fluidics, chemistries, CRISPR technologies are starting to revolutionize diagnostics. But we're also seeing tremendous innovation in miniaturization and automation, And we're seeing such amazing technology coming out on different readout technologies, specifically the thing that all of us carry around in our pocket, phones. So iPhones, Android phones, Google phones are all being adapted to be used in either the actual diagnostic test itself or on reporting whether somebody is positive or not, which is a requirement from the CARES Act. So that is one of the risks that we have in testing, is if you do self-testing, you're actually legally supposed to self-report. We know that people aren't doing that. Next slide. So this is actually the actual announcement that was made back in April. Right now, all the applications are on hold, so we're not taking any more applications. I'll show you how many we received. You notice we actually haven't stopped it. We've just placed it on hold because we're hoping that Congress will allocate more funding for testing, and if that's the case, again, just have to Google NIH POCTERN, you'll come to this website. And just keep an eye on that website, because if funding does open up, it'll appear on this website. And this is different. This program is different from every other NIH funding program that you might be aware of, whether that be research grants or SBIRs or STTRs or BARDA grants. It's a completely different program with a completely different process, which I'll describe in a second. Next slide. So this actually describes how a little bit what we're working with. We've actually have a number of institutions from around the country working to help this group. There's several thousand people now working with the RADx program. Not only the people getting the awards, but one of the things that are different about these grants versus other grants is in-kind work is being provided for all the awardees from these organizations known as ACME and CAPCAT. I won't go into it, but it's Emory and Georgia Tech, it's the University of Massachusetts, it's Northwestern's, it's Johns Hopkins, and we're actually signing up other institutions, all who are getting additional funding, and they're providing resources for clinical trials, for quality management systems, for all kinds of things to help companies get products to market in a compliant way, all free of charge. So whereas a company might have won a couple $1 million grant, some companies are actually getting tens of millions of dollars of extra help from all of these associations, which is again quite different from any of the other NIH type grants. Next slide, please. And again, this kind of shows you a little bit different graphic of it. So the NIBIB National Network, which has been focused for the last 5 or 6 years for developing new point of care technologies, has put together this consortium that you see here of both a private and public enterprise to actually the question was, how could we actually get products to market within 5 months when traditionally they've taken 2 to 3 years, sometimes 4 or 5 years. So again, I'm one of more than 1,000 RADx experts and contributors, which are helping this program go. I have a few more minutes, so I got to go fast. And again, there's a number of people out of ULP, and again, Sam can expand upon it, which are now working with me. I'm working with a good 5 or 10 more people from ULP on this program. Next slide. So this kind of shows you the process that we went through, which is different from any other NIH grant. There was actually a national call for technologies that opened on April 29th. And then it actually went through a screening, a very rapid screening and funding process. We call it a Shark Tank or a rapid selection process. There was a group of people that screened all the applications. And if they thought they looked promising and they could get a product out to market, they would go advance to what's known as a deep dive or phase 0. And the companies received $25,000, and they literally went through if you ever watched Shark Tank, they went through a 7-day Shark Tank exercise where people like me and teams, there's 50 teams screening all these applications to see if what they were proposing looked real and promising, that they actually had real data. If they were successful, they got moved into phase 1, which was a 4 to 8 week process to de-risk the technology. And if they were successful after that, they got a lot of funding to move into phase 2, which is ultimately clinical validation, regulatory approval, and scaling up their production and moving it to release. So again, the whole goal was to do this in 5 to 6 months. We received 3,000 applications, 707 which were complete. Of those 707, only 125 made it into phase 0. Of the 125, 46 made it into phase 1. And I have one more slide. There's actually more than 14 right now in phase 2. So next slide. And here's an update, a more updated one. Again, you see the 3,000. There was an expert review. So of the 707 applications, when they were completed, they were reviewed within 48 hours. There was a team of 8 people that reviewed those. If they thought they looked promising, they moved to 125 of them got moved to a deep dive group, and there was 50 teams. I led one of the 50 teams. We had to review them within 7 to 10 days. And we either said fund them or don't fund them. Of those, 46 made it into work package 1. And so far of the 46, 32 are now in work package 2. Some are still in work package 1. So we think another 8 to 10 will make it into work package 2. And when we actually started this program off, we actually thought we'd only end up funding 6 companies. So we're actually have changed as we learn more and more about the disease and more about testing, that we had to get a lot more companies get their products to market in order to get up to those 6 million tests a day capacity. And I think I only have one more slide. So again, just in summary, we think this is a very innovative program. I would really keep my eyes peeled onto that website. Hopefully one day Congress will pass some additional funding. We already know both the House and the Senate has agreed to allocate more money for testing and other programs associated with COVID-19. Unfortunately, I think it's not going to happen until after the election. And I think with that, I'm going to have to stop. I think you can hit that one more time. There's probably and this kind of gives you a summary of all the companies that are currently in the portfolio. Right now, pricing is really crazy high. We're actually trying to get tests to market that are a lot cheaper, less than $30, preferably less than $10. We're really focused on point of care. We're trying to focus on getting more tests out that can be done in less than an hour and clearly within the same day. 80% of the companies being funded are in nucleic acid detection or molecular, 20% antigen testing, and then we're focused on getting new technology out to market, which is really where you can actually take the test yourself or take the sample yourself. And with that, I got to jump onto another call. That's my last slide. So if you have any questions, please ask Molly. She'll get them to me, and I'll be able to answer them later.
Richard, Thank you so much. I know you've got to go, and I just want to say thanks a lot for
Sure.
providing this insight.
Okay, my pleasure. All right, take care.
And, all right, so I'm going to try to take the next 15 minutes or so to give you a bit of an overview of the federal response and where there is and is not money. A lot of the story is similar to what Richard just described, which is that there was a lot of money. It stemmed primarily from the CARES Act and PPP funding. That money is largely allocated already, and a lot of the agencies are just holding off to see what's coming next. So overall, and I'm going to show you a couple of things. I had a lot of fun putting this together. One of the amazing websites that I found was the covidmoneytracker.org. Not on this PowerPoint, but on the website. All of these are hyperlinks, so you can dive into all of this. The COVID money is both legislative as well as what was allocated by the Federal Reserve. $4 trillion from the congressional acts. Some of those funds were dedicated to health spending, which was both for like hospitals as well as for agencies. So I'm going to focus in now to the $12 billion that was allocated to various agencies and just go through a little bit of what was different. There was $8 billion dedicated to the CDC, and overall, roughly $4 billion to NIH. Much of that was in the RADx program, but not all of it. And in particular, I want to talk about the National Cancer Institute. I'll leave that one. The National Cancer Institute, because it may be somewhat of a surprise. If you want to read probably as much as is known about how the NIH allocated its money and why, there is a strategic plan. But within NCI, because of recent cancer therapies that are related to immunology, there was a significant body of experts that are related to immunology and serology. And so NCI has taken over a lot of the expertise in immunology, and they are putting together funding and have allocated quite a bit of funding for serological sciences. So I want to make sure that that is expressed in case you have those types of technologies. And a lot of that funding was just recently allocated. The NIH website is fantastic in terms of finding out whether there are additional active solicitations, and on the website you can find links that take you to what are the open solicitations for diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. All right, I think, and there are quite a lot of them, 235 open solicitations for COVID. I want to go to some other agencies now, though, in particular BARDA. One of the slides in the stack that I skipped over tells you that BARDA is actually part of Health and Human Services, as is the National Institutes of Health, as is the FDA, CDC, and many other agencies. But BARDA, Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, protects us against bio threats of all types, natural and unnatural. And they had a large amount of funding, over $13 billion, that was allocated. So when you see in the news the large amounts of money that have been given to vaccine manufacturers like Glaxo and Sanofi. Those monies are coming from BARDA. And in fact, the vast majority of the response so far from BARDA has been related to vaccines, but not all of it. This is a nice table that shows, while for vaccines, these are huge numbers from 38 million to 2.4 billion as award amounts. There are other awards that clearly have gone to smaller organizations, so don't think that BARDA money is only for big companies. And in fact, there are 3 ways to partner with BARDA, and they've made it reasonably easy to do this, and the review process typically is piece by piece. So you send them a short white paper. They have formats, so don't just send them something without looking at these, but relatively short white papers. If it passes the first review, they'll do deeper and deeper dives, as you saw in the process that Richard was describing. All right, I want to go now to one more slide. There is this BARDA Industry Day. If you are interested in what types of opportunities are available at BARDA, taking a look at their website, and if you find things that are look interesting, certainly sign up for this virtual event. All right. Similarly, NSF got targeted money. So NSF is an agency separate from Health and Human Services, but they had dedicated money from the Acts of Congress, from part of that $4 trillion. There were about 500 awards that were made between April and July. As far as I can tell, all of the rapid COVID response funding, it has been allocated. But they're currently accepting proposals, and if you have things that are related to COVID or pandemic management, you just certainly should feel free to propose those things. It's a 2-step process with NSF: a pitch, which is relatively short and structured, and then the pitch has to be accepted, but if it is, you're invited to put together a full proposal. DoD, certainly in the news, you've seen that DoD has issues with COVID, whether it's the ship that has a COVID outbreak, or things maybe you don't hear as much about, how we're protecting our warfighters from COVID when they're stationed both in the US as well as around the world. There are a number of DoD contracts. DoD works with contracts, a number of contracts that are available with respect to COVID. So 156 notices in the search for COVID. 53 of those are dedicated to small businesses, and there are currently 13 open solicitations from DoD for small businesses, including those SBIR and STTR. All of those can be found now at a relatively new website, beta.sam.gov. All right, so I'm gonna end. That's my whirlwind. These slides will be available to you, but in the end, government money is still available. There's not as much as there was in April to July with the CARES and PPP Act funding. Another legislative action, as Richard said, could release additional funds, but we'll need to wait to see what shape that legislation takes. Some of the slides that are in here that I skipped over help to document that the best experts think that pandemics are with us. They've been with us historically, and there are a number of references to flu as well as coronavirus and potentially others that we'll have to face in the future. This is an amazing event that we're all living through. Don't underestimate the historical significance. There are experts that think that SARS-CoV-2 may become endemic, and that's going to depend on both the vaccine efficacy that we can achieve, as well as the biology of the longevity of the immune responses that we get either from active disease or from the vaccines. What's needed, whether it's for SARS-CoV-2 or the next pandemic, are biomedical tools and rapid methods for developing those tools that are diagnostics, vaccines, and therapeutics. There are behavioral tools that I think it's clear is needed, and there are funds available for managing behaviors. Clearly, this pandemic has shown challenges that exist in the supply chain and government preparedness, and there almost certainly will be additional funding as we tail out of SARS-CoV-2 and start really taking preparedness seriously. All right, I want to finish by saying that I'm here, Richard is here, Laura Beacon, who's also knowledgeable and SBDC consultant. We're here to help you. There are other consultants at UC Riverside, at Cal State Fullerton, and Cal State San Bernardino to help you either with these types of grants and contracts, or with designing how to manage your business in this COVID-19 pandemic. All right, with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. And somehow we're going to make these slides available. And let's see, Sam, are you there? Are you managing the Q&A?
Yeah. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the Q&A box or write it in the chat, and I'll pitch them to Molly. Someone asked how to get in touch with the SBDC. I believe it's on the slide right now.
Yes, exactly. This website, sbdctech.com/UCI Applied Innovation, is probably the best way on there. Somehow, I think this is a screenshot from it. Somehow you should probably go and it will say contact. That's probably where I go and just start the process of becoming a client. We have you sign up. It's really easy. As Julie said initially, it is no cost to you, and you get the expertise of folks that I like to hang out with. That's why I'm a consultant, and they're truly amazing, whether it's the technology-oriented folks or the business-oriented folks. All right, other questions?
Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to put them in.
No, there's only a few of you, but go ahead. You can ask.
I think one thing is, since like BARDA, NSF, BAD, they all receive more awards and fundings, I guess, how can a startup know which ones to apply for, and then how can they be more competitive to the competitions?
Yes, Sam, that's a great question. And what we like to do as consultants is typically talk with you, understand just generally what your technology is, what you think you want to do. We ask you to write up someplace between a couple of paragraphs and a page. We'll help you craft that if you want us to help you. And then we get you in touch with program officers to ask them whether their agency is interested. So it's really important to figure out ways to understand whether you're likely to be competitive, whether the agency is interested in what you have. And we try to do that in as efficient a way as possible, which is always before you put together a full proposal.